Great. So I think what we'll do is for this presentation, Daniel and I will both talk. We'll both introduce ourselves, and at the end, we try and go. We'll try and keep the pace going pretty quick, because what some people tell us afterwards is the topics obviously are very important for people who attended, but having that Q&A at the end, have a chance to actually get your questions answered. People have replied back to us saying that's extremely valuable. So we definitely want to have some time left in the end for your questions. And as Allison said, please put them in chat and we'll walk through them. I think spotlight goes to kick this off. Daniel, you are the second slide. So there's going to be a introduction of you first.
Thanks, Mark. I really appreciate you inviting me. Okay, so we're an immigration law firm located in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. We represent clients located within Canada, the United States, and around the world, primarily providing cross-border visa services to professionals, entrepreneurs, investors, and corporations who are seeking to relocate their employees to Canada. So that includes applications under the Global Talent Stream, which we're going to be discussing today, Mark, as well as express entry, permanent residency applications. My firm has obviously a lot of experience in these areas. We've worked together for a number of years and assisting a large number now of individuals come over through Syndesis, and as well as other companies through similar immigration programs, such as the offering that Path to Canada has. So happy to be here today. Thank you very much for inviting me, and looking forward to having the opportunity to discuss these program options with you, with the audience, and answer any questions that they may have.
Thanks, Daniel. And just a quick introduction of me. I started Syndesis back in 2014. Goal was to basically help US companies recruit, hire, and legally employ workers in Canada. And then the flip side was, I actually, from a perspective of an American having lived in Canada, met a lot of Canadians who said, hey, look, I want to work here for US companies, but I don't want to leave. Home is Canada. I want to stay. Could I work for these cool companies in the US? So that's what I've been doing for the last 7 years. Before that, I worked for 7 VC-backed tech companies in Silicon Valley. I'm a US citizen. The question always comes up of how to, from a US citizen's perspective, how I got all this Canada experience. I lived there twice. So I went there on a student visa, got my MBA from Canada's top business school, came right back to Silicon Valley, had no plans on staying in Canada. And then a year later, ended up living in Toronto, working venture capital, another Canadian tech company, came back home. But with that perspective of having 5 years of living in Canada, but having a tech career in the US, that's what helped me realize that there was a problem to solve, which is basically helping US companies hire in Canada and then helping Canadians work remotely. The second part of that, what's not on this slide then, is as I learned about Canadia's immigration programs, especially work visa programs, I worked a little more closely with Daniel. And as he'll talk about the Global Talent Stream, what I realized was, okay, I've got one company, Syndesis. It has a model where it can remotely employ people in Canada. I also came to the realization of that model doesn't work for everyone. As we'll walk through in the slides, there are some of you work for a US company that if you approached your employer and said, hey, can I work remotely permanently? For a couple of you, that might work. For probably 90+% of you, you might be working for a big US company already that can't move you. I basically started another company called Path to Canada, where I'll tell more about later on, but it allows people who are in the US educated, US experienced. I want to connect you to Canadian tech companies who are seeking to hire you. They'll sponsor your work visa. They're going to bring you up to Canada. They'll get you started on your career up there. Basically, I have 2 different companies that have similar offerings to help people with tech careers move to Canada. In terms of agenda, what we're going to do is we just finished intros. We will walk through story of Pranav. He's a tech worker. He was in Dallas. We moved him up to Canada. I'll walk through that. Daniel's going to talk about Canadian immigration options. He's also going to talk about Canada's work visa program, Global Talent Stream. He'll talk about how to qualify for it. Then I'll talk about how you use this work visa program, 2 different ways to move your job to Canada or get a job in Canada. And they'll have Q&A after that. So just a quick overview and this story is on the Syndesis website. Basically, last summer in the middle of COVID, Pranav's company I believe they were in Dallas, had reached out to us and to Syndesis and said, we have a worker, OPT is expiring, they can't stay in the US. We had read that Syndesis has the ability to move someone's job to Canada. Walk us through how this works. So we had a call with, first they had an initial call with them, then had a call with Pranav, and then basically said, like, you know, you ready to move to Canada? You know, it's not, you can't stay in the US. Your option, you're basically, your door is closing by, you know, within the next 8 months. You can't stay in the US. Are you open for moving to Canada? Good conversations with him. He just walked through what's possible. He had a phone call with Daniel Mandelbaum. Daniel qualified him in for Global Talent Stream, said he has the background to get in. And then at some point, it's basically a two-pronged decision, but Pranav said, okay, me and my wife are ready to move to Canada. We're out of options in the US. Sometimes it's not a matter of, do I want to stay in the US? Sometimes you simply know, like, your OPT is expiring on a certain date, you didn't get picked. There are no other choices. And Pranav, there's lots of things he liked about Canadian immigration. One of the things was, you know, we talked about Global Talent Stream and how, and Daniel walked through, like, here's how the work visa program works. It's 2 years. Here's a Canadian permanent residency works. Here's how fast you're going to be a permanent resident. Here's how fast you're going to be a citizen of Canada. Basically walked through the timelines, which were dramatically different, as Daniel's going to show versus the US. And of course, Pranav asked, well, okay, you're talking about, you know, how does this work for me? How does this work for my wife? And Daniel's like, no, it's an open work permit. You get your work permit, you'll be working remotely for Syndesis, doing the same job that you did in Dallas. Wife has an open work permit. She can work for any Canadian tech company. So basically it's a better version, as you'll find out, of work visas and immigration that we have in the US. In the middle of COVID, during a time where it was very difficult, there's long lines to get into Canada. Pranav started the application process in summer. By the end of the year, he was approved. The timelines were dramatically longer then. First week in January, in the middle of COVID, borders stayed open for people with work visas going into Canada. Pranav moved to Canada first week. He is now based in Vancouver, basically took his laptop with him, did the same job that he was doing in Dallas. It's a little bit rainier, a little bit colder in Vancouver, awesome city. He basically picked his life up there. Same pay, same salary, same job title, same work. Resumed work the day he got into Canada. Now he's working remotely for his company in Dallas, doing the exact same work that he loves. And he's on a new life path, basically. Daniel, I know you worked on that file. Is anything to add in terms of the timeframes? I think I want to make sure that I got the facts right in terms of Pranav's path to being a Canadian permanent resident.
You know, I think everything you've mentioned so far is on the right track, Mark. You know, the next step in this process is to talk about permanent residency and how this all fits together. So he was able to come to Canada as quickly as you said, even despite, despite the fact that we were dealing with COVID and border restrictions. And fortunately, as we'll talk about later, things are much quicker these days.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we'll hop to the next slide. And yeah, Daniel, this is your world of Canadian immigration.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. So the immigration program that we're going to be talking about today, the Global Talent Stream, a lot of people ask, well, how does this relate to obtaining permanent residency? Because Global Talent Stream is really about obtaining a work visa fast for a high-skilled, high-tech worker, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But persons who do qualify through the Global Talent Stream program, when I review their eligibility, I also take a look at the longer-term eligibility of the individual that's coming and map out a pathway that they can go from a work visa to permanent residency. So Canada has a number of fast-track immigration programs for that. The main or flagship program is the express entry system for permanent residents. And this system is absolutely wonderful. It's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. To anybody who wishes to apply, they go online, you can create a profile, you need to be invited to apply, and then you can submit an application for permanent residency. But it's a competition. And part of that competition involves having more points than anyone else who has submitted an immigration profile in order to receive an invitation to apply. The government of Canada simply just will not invite everyone. And having a global talent stream, this GTS-based work permit, gives a candidate a competitive edge. It gives them more points on the system, makes them more competitive, allows them to gain Canadian work experience. And if they don't immediately qualify for permanent residency when they arrive, after having 1 year of Canadian work experience and passing a language test, you'll qualify for a a permanent residency program called the Canadian Experience Class. So you'll have a pathway in through that option. Typically speaking, a person who comes as a permanent resident has to be physically present in Canada for a period of at least 3 years, and then they can apply for citizenship. They'll then be able to get a Canadian passport and apply for a Nexus Pass. That would be for cross-border between Canada and the United States, seamless travel between Canada and the US. Just go right through customs without having to stop. And preferential access to work visas in the US, such as the TN work visa. That's under the Canada-US-Mexico agreement, formerly the NAFTA. So a person who is working in Canada as a systems analyst, or they're working as a software engineer, graphics designer, whatever it may be, they may come to Canada initially on this global talent stream work permit, become a permanent resident in Canada under the express entry system in as fast as 6 months, a citizen in 3 years, and they could be returning to the United States on a preferential TN visa in one of those 3 occupations, or a number of others, about 60 plus occupations on the list. So this is a wonderful opportunity, a wonderful pathway for people to come to Canada and really gives a whole host of options. So I'll jump into the global talent stream on the next slide, Allison, if you don't mind. Thank you so much. So what is the global talent stream, and how does this work? So Canada has created a fast track option for high-tech, high-skilled workers to obtain work visas in Canada. It's part of something called the Global Skills Strategy. So a few years ago, in 2017, the government of Canada decided that it wanted to stand out from other countries so to make Canada more attractive to the top talent around the world. And it created this thing called the Global Skills Strategy. One aspect of the Global Skills Strategy was to create opportunities for companies in Canada who are employing high-tech workers to bring them to Canada fast. And so it's a 2-step process. The first step of the process involves seeking approval for the position in Canada. So a company like Syndesis will arrange with the government of Canada or negotiate a certain number of spots that are available to it in order to bring in top talent from around the world, high-tech talent, business analysts, business savvy positions. All right. On the next slide, Allison, I think we've got just sort of an illustration of what those positions are. So you can see that they map out across not just your typical tech positions of engineers, testers, designers, and developers, but we've got VFX and game creatives. You have statisticians and mathematicians, security and information systems analysts and consultants, data scientists. So all of these candidates, positions are open for the global talent stream. And a candidate who meets the qualifications of the global talent stream can then apply for a work permit. Now, in order to do that, you need to have a Canadian employer who gives you a job offer in one of these positions. And that's where Syndesis steps in. Syndesis arranges with your current employer for remote employment in Canada, gives you a job offer in these positions to provide services in one of these professional occupations to a company that you're working for right now in the US. All right. So we apply, it takes 2 weeks to get a position approval. Once the position is approved, you can then apply for a work permit. That process similarly takes about 2 weeks, give or take, because of biometrics and passport delivery. But the key feature here is it's fast. All right. If you mind one more slide there, Allison. It's very different than the H-1B program. Thank you, Allison. Very, very different than the H-1B program that many of you are familiar with. The H-1B program, as you know, is pretty rigid. It's only open certain times of the year. And there's a cap, there's a quota, how many spots that are going to be awarded to any one company in a given year, as well as obviously a global quota of 65,000 applicants, or an additional 20,000 for master's graduates of US universities and colleges. So it's very limited. the Canadian system that I've just described, the global talent stream, has no cap on the number of workers that can obtain a Canadian work visa through the global talent stream. It's basically, the only limitation is finding the employment in Canada from an employer who likes Indices, and the employers that Marc deals with in Path to Canada are committed to growing their businesses. It's open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. There's no weighted lottery system, so small companies, big companies alike can equally benefit. And then you're working for the employer that's named on your work permit, on a closed work permit. But as Marc said before, if you have a spouse, you can get an open permit for your spouse to work for any employer anywhere in the country. It's huge compared to the US system, where it's very limited. If you're on an F1 OPT, or you're there on an H-1B, your spouse is an H-4, she can't get her employment authorization, or he can't get his employment authorization document. This is wonderful because Canada, in order to stay globally competitive, to attract skilled workers, high-skilled tech workers just like you, they've created these options to make it even more attractive. Now you can earn two incomes. You can continue to work high-paying tech jobs, US companies, but from Canada. And no quotas based on country. So every single year, the top two countries where Canada brings in skilled economic immigrants are India and China, right? In the United States, they're capped at a percentage of the total number of immigrants that they'll award permanent visas to. But in Canada, those numbers keep climbing every year, and the top occupation profiles are those in tech. So our clients are coming from all over the world, but a huge number of them are now coming from the United States, people who are in these lengthy queues that seem to be getting longer and longer and longer. Before we launched the global skills strategy in Canada in 2017, I remember speaking to people and they were telling me, oh, my priority date is in 2007. Looks like it's going to be maybe 10 years. Now I'm speaking to people 4 years later. They're saying my priority date, right? And they're telling me when it is. And we're looking at 15, 20 years. And I've read reports recently that by the end of this decade, if you're an Indian citizen, you could be waiting 30 years for a green card. 30 years. Your children will have, first of all, you'll get married, have kids, they're going to go to university, they're going to graduate, and they're going to be on their OPT visa waiting for an H-1B before you even get a green card. That's insane, right? In Canada, in 5 years, you can be back in the US on a TN visa. You've got a work visa, you got your permanent residency, you got your citizenship, you have your Nexus pass, you're going across the border, you're living on both sides. So this is a wonderful system, huge contrast to the United States. And as Marc will mention, he'll talk about how we can make that happen, where you move your current job to Canada or get a job with a Canadian tech company. So I'll pass that back over to you, Marc.
Thanks, Daniel. Having Wi-Fi issues, so I'm not sure if you can hear me.
So I hear you perfectly fine. Is Allison there? Allison, can you hear me okay? Is the Wi-Fi me or is it?
Okay, I can hear both of you. I do notice that Marc's a little bit choppy, so I'm going to turn my video off just to see if that'll help. And if anyone else is having issues, just feel free to tap into the chat and let us know.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll maybe killing off my video will help. Let's see if that works too. Yeah, can you still hear me okay, Daniel?
Hear you loud and clear.
All right, let's turn this video off. Yeah, so thanks for the overview of Canadian immigration. Let me know if you cannot hear me along the way, Daniel. Well, so what we can do basically is, so you're a tech worker in the US, going to walk through two options for you. There's moving your current job from the US to Canada, and then that may work for a couple of you. For the majority of you, you're going to look at your employer, and there's not going to be that ability to move your job. For the majority of you, the focus becomes how about finding any tech job in Canada? How about interviewing with Canadian tech companies who will sponsor your work visa? We'll walk through that scenario too. We'll talk about the first one, moving your current job to Canada. Let's go for the next analysis. So to qualify, Daniel walked through what it takes to qualify for a global talent stream. So what often happens is we'll have, sometimes the employer will call us and say, we're about to lose a worker going to Canada, about to lose a worker, expired OPT. We read, Marc, that Syndesus can move them up. Can you tell us how it works? More often we have the worker themselves saying, I didn't get picked, or I would like to leave the US. I want to understand how this works. How does this process work? How can I take a job from LA, Dallas, New York, where I'm currently based, and just pick that job up in Canada? So there's a few requirements. The first thing we do is make sure you as the worker qualify for Global Talent Stream. We arrange a consulting call with Daniel's firm. He walks you through that, basically yes or no. And if you're a tech worker, as Daniel said, you have a degree, you either manage tech workers or you're a tech worker yourself, you have an offer from a Canadian tech company, most likely you're going to qualify. Once that's out of the way, then you have to look at the job that you're doing, and it has to be 100% remote. There is no travel. So sometimes we get calls from consultants who are on the road and say, Marc, when COVID's restrictions are gone, I'm back on the road, going to client sites. This won't work. This is basically the 100% remote job where you take your laptop, you move to Canada, and you're not coming back across the border. Maybe once a year for meetings, maybe twice a year, but that's it. So how to move your job to Canada. This slide actually there's two different groups on the slide. It's you and the company you work for. So we're having a conversation with the company saying, is this job 100% remote? You'll be telling them you'll be signing contracts, you'll be paying fees. And of course, there's no cost to you as the worker. What we're also asking though is there is an expectation with this move that you will be giving up on, in a way, you're giving up on the American dream. And that's where a lot of these phone calls we have, you hear a worker will hear someone's past about how they got to the US, how they did everything right. And then after a few tries, they don't get picked for the lottery. They have no more options in the US. So one thing we always emphasize is exactly what Daniel said. We want to if we can move your job to Canada to 2-year work visa, in between year 1 and 2, you'll probably be a Canadian permanent resident. You'll be on a path to citizenship. You can be a citizen in 4 to 5 years. Take that path, move your job up if you can, live and work in Canada, and give Canada a shot. 5 years from now, 4.5 years from now, you're a Canadian permanent, you become a Canadian citizen. Maybe at that point you say, hey, I think I want to try the US again. You now do it as a Canadian citizen, whole different path to come down to the US. Or at that point, you may realize, hey, I've got an awesome career in Canada. Why would I leave? But you have options. We'll jump to the next slide, please. So how does it work, basically? Because you're thinking, I'm working for a company like Pranav in Dallas. I'm working for a startup in San Francisco. We have someone working for a robotics company in upstate New York. How do they get to legally move to Canada? So what happens is, as the second bullet says, Syndesus has an agreement with Canadian immigration to bring dozens of people in. So we're already cleared with Canadian immigration. They know we bring people in. They know we're going to continue to get approvals. We can do it even faster. Second, we're an employer in Canada. Syndesus is a Canadian corporation, which means we have the ability to employ people in Canada. In this case, not only do we sponsor your work visa, then once you cross the border, we become your legal employer. Therefore, we do this all the time. We employ over 100 people in Canada, all working for US companies. Of the 100, probably over 90 of them are Canadian permanent residents, Canadian citizens. And then we have people that we've moved up from the US and we're employing them too. So basically how that works is we bring you across the border. You basically take the offer letter that you had in the US. And when you get entry into Canada, your work permit's done. You leave the US on one day, your job in the US ends. For example, on the 15th of August, you fly to Canada that night. 16th, you're in Canada. You start with Syndesus. Same job, same title. It's a mirror of the same job you have, except now it's all in Canadian dollars. Your you're going to be paid, you're going to be legally working and getting paid in Canada. Direct deposit, all the HR rights, everything you had in the US, we basically do the same thing in Canada, and we bill your US company for this. This process costs you nothing. We're basically, the logic we're working with your US company is, and this is the conversation we have with HR all the time. Well, we know that if you lost the ability to work in the US, you're going to have to leave at some point. We ask employers, will you keep working with this person when they go back to India, to Ukraine, to China, to Singapore? Unfortunately, we hear the answer, no, when the person leaves the country, we can't continue to employ them. Versus if they're sitting just north of the border in the same time zone, of course we could still employ them. So basically your company is looking at this saying, this is how we get to keep someone who is an awesome employee and someone we know. If you leave the company, I have this conversation all the time. Company says, shares the numbers with me to replace the worker. Like if you have to leave, they have to go get a recruiter. They have to spend tens and tens of thousands of dollars to replace you, which they don't want to do. Sometimes these conversations are quite easy with the company. And we'll jump to the next slide, please. And then how does it get paid? What we're basically doing is Syndesis becomes your employer at whatever salary you're probably making in the US. We bill your employer every month. So for all the people that are employed in Canada right now, there's over 100 of them. We billed their company a couple weeks back. They all wired money to Royal Bank of Canada this week. And then in August, all the workers get paid middle of the month, last day of the month, direct deposit into a Canadian dollar account, net of all Canadian taxes. You don't pay taxes in the US anymore because you don't live there. You're on your way you're a resident of Canada. So when we handle all that for you, you are a Canadian employee, not a contractor. You have all the rights you have all the HR rights you had in the US. You get all the same HR rights in Canada. You're not a contractor. This is not a temporary play. This is a long-term play. So we're handling everything basically both for you and your employer in Canada. You just basically start doing the same job as you were doing. Let's jump to the next slide, please. As I mentioned, that works for a couple of you, probably for over 90% of you on the call that we deal with. We realize the US company, sometimes we'll get someone from a big company, IBM, et cetera. If IBM or Microsoft or some big tech company can't move you to Canada, Syndesis won't be the one. You may be working for a company where you're doing projects. A lot of those companies are operating on a specific margin. It may not be in their interest to move you. What we realize is for a lot of you, you're going to say, hey, I'm on my own. I don't have this company willing to move me across the border. How can you help me? So that's why I started a second company called Path to Canada. The goal of Path to Canada is I want to connect US educated, US experienced engineers who can't stay in the US. I want to connect them with Canadian tech companies that are partnering with us who will sponsor your global talent stream work visa. They have their own agreements with the Canadian government. They are eager to hire tech talent. A lot of them, just like in the US, are having trouble hiring people. When we reach out to them and say, we have access to a pool of engineers, US experienced, US degrees in a lot of cases, who can't stay in the US. Like we talk to these companies every week. They're excited. They're like, this is awesome. We don't know how to find people who have that skill set. We only know how to look in Canada. And the Canadian tech companies say, well, we've heard, we know we have a good work visa program. We can use it to bring people, skilled people into Canada. Let's jump to the next slide, please. So basically what we're doing is we're connecting you with the company that sponsors your work visa. And we'll jump to the next slide, please. So here's how it basically works. So Path to Canada website, what you can do is you go to the website. We'll share a link after the webinar. You fill out the Am I a Candidate form. It's going to ask questions like, how many years of experience do you have? US experience, before the US experience. What degrees do you have? Did you take the IELTS test? Have you applied for express entry? What we're trying to do is not only learn your tech background, we're trying to learn your intent. So what we also learned is the Canadian employers always ask us, they said, well, we're willing to invest, we're willing to pay for the work visa, we're willing to take the time to bring someone to Canada, but Mark, the candidates, are they motivated to move to Canada? So one of the requirements we always ask is, to show that motivation, we want you to have taken the IELTS test within the last 2 years, and we'd like you to apply for permanent residence. Some people will tell us, I've got my score, it's 380, it's 410, it's 420. What we always want to share with people is a Canadian, as Daniel mentioned, Canadian permanent residence is a point-based system. You get a Canadian job offer, say that you went through express entry and you have a points total, it's not enough points. Job offer is 50 points. You get that job offer, add 50 points. Every year you work in Canada, more points. So there's a lot of people who come to us and look at this job direction here through Canadian tech companies saying, hey, this is my way to get it, not only to get a work visa to get into Canada, but once I'm there, I'm going to get permanent residence. It's the faster way in. So what we're doing in the first step is we're gathering information. Next step, what we're doing is we're vetting. So what we'll do is the Canadian tech companies have all said, we want tech workers, obviously, 4+ years experience. If you have that, you'll probably get a video interview from us, from one of our recruiting team. They're going to ask you some more questions to make sure that see if you've applied for express entry, answer questions in the program. In the background, what our sales team is doing is they're talking to Canadian tech companies, explaining to them we have a pool of talent that's vetted with video interviews. People are excited to move to Canada. Then we're signing tech companies up. We've signed up close to 20 so far. All of them have multiple jobs open. We sign up more each week. Step 4 basically is tech company, for example, says, yeah, we need 2 DevOps and we need 2 full stack engineers. We'll look through our database. Maybe that matches you. What we'll do is our recruiter then will reach out to you and say, we have a DevOps position. It appears to match your background. The company in Canada is in the crypto space, or they're B2B. You have the right to refuse. You can say, you know what, I like gaming, or you know what, I want to hold out for fintech. That's more my style. No problem. We understand people fit at a certain place and are trying to find jobs that are a good fit for them. If you say, yes, that sounds awesome, I look at the company's website, send me over, we send you over, you interview with them. Step 4 basically is you're directly talking to the Canadian tech company. Path to Canada is now out of the discussion. You're going through their interview because you're going to work for them. 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, they come back and they're like, awesome, congratulations, here's your job offer. You get the verbal offer from them. Then you'll negotiate salary directly with them. You come to an agreement. The Canadian tech company then will say, that's great, we're going to sponsor your work visa. The immigration lawyer reaches out to you, gathers the information. Step 5 basically is the company is working together with an immigration lawyer to get you in 4 to 5 weeks from start to finish. When you apply for a Canadian work visa to when it's issued, over 99% approval. Basically, we're vetting candidates before. If you qualify for Global Talent Stream, the program it's unlike in the US, where we're used to here in the States. Canadian immigration is actually trying to get people into the country. I've had dozens of phone calls with Canadian immigration officials. Everyone's friendly. It's easy. It's easy to deal with them. It's a different mindset that we're used to down in the US. I'm dealing with US immigration. 4 or 5 weeks later, your work visa is approved. You get an email from Canadian immigration. Your work visa is approved. Come on into Canada. Welcome. At that point, you can close up your life in the US. Some people basically within 1 or 2 weeks quickly are leaving their apartment, leaving their life, closing out with their US company, moving to Canada. We can help with that. Then you basically move, get your work visa as you cross into Canada, start your new life in Canada. That's basically the process of what Path to Canada is doing. We're trying to connect people with US experience, help them move across the border, pair them up with Canadian tech companies. And we can jump to the next slide. Yeah, that's basically finishes the presentation. I'll jump back to camera on because I think my Wi-Fi is stable. Definitely I see there's some questions in the chat. Definitely want to hear back from all of you if you have any questions on what we've shared.
All right. I saw a couple people came in, and they can definitely, anyone who came in late, you will get a copy of the recording of this, so don't worry. You'll have a chance to re-watch later on. Mark, there were a couple people who had signed up ahead that have some questions, so I just want to address those right away here. From Tree, we have, they're curious about what US companies support relocation to Canada and remote work.
So what we've usually seen, a company of any scale, so like sometimes I'll see people applying, and I like use the IBM example. I've seen I've seen very large someone working for a very large US corporation. They're not going to work with to move your job up there. What happens is, if you think of any US tech company, Microsoft, Oracle, any of the big companies, either in tech or non-tech, if they have a Canadian branch, their first move is to transfer you up there on an L1 visa or to work out some kind of a transfer. The big tech companies do it all the time. If that's not an option, then your best option is to go with Path to Canada. If I look at all the companies that we're working with right now who are signing up to move jobs up, well over half of them are venture backed. We have clients in DC, Bay Area, New York. What I've noticed with companies that are venture backed is they're generous with their salaries. It's tough to work in that environment. So they have a rigorous process of interview process to make sure the right people fit there. And when they're faced with the possibility of losing you, their angle of it, their solution is, well, we don't want to. We want to try and move your job to Canada. So what I've noticed is a lot of our clients who fit that space, they have the resources to do so. The other companies that I've seen doing it, it's smaller companies, again, never having none of them have a Canadian presence. Some companies are as small as 5 or 10 people, some are in the hundreds, some are up near 1,000. But what I see with them is they don't have a Canadian presence. The formula still holds. You're a trusted employee. You're someone they depend on. You're someone they know. You're someone that they respect. And when they get this option, they're willing to invest to move you across the border because you're critical to the team. You're part of the team and you're critical to the team. Those are the two types of companies that I see willing to move people to Canada.
Thanks, Mark. Next one we have from Mandelbaum. He says, hi, I am 44 and my wife is 39. I'm currently on an H-1 and my green card is under EV2 processing, but the waiting period is uncertain, 10 years. My wife is on a non-job H-4 spouse visa. So overall, we're in an uncertain situation and my wife doesn't know when she can get an EAD to get back to her IT career. She's out of the job since 5 years. Is there a way for her or me to apply to Canada and be assured of a way to get there?
Daniel, I think this one's going to be for you because I'm thinking through like the questions of like, do they have this? She has a tech background, but not working in the last 5 years. I don't know if he has a tech background or what his degrees are. Those are the questions you're always posing on these calls.
Yeah, this is a tough one to answer because it's not a ton of information, but let me assume for a moment that they're both working in IT. Obviously, if that's the case, or they're working. Oh, there we go. We both have a tech background. Excellent. So the question then is, goes back to what you were saying before. Can they work remotely? If they can work remotely, are you able to speak to their employer to bring them to Canada? If not, sign up to Path to Canada. But I guess the question was a little bit more nuanced than just that. This gentleman is 44 years old. He's married, maybe has kids, doesn't want to relocate his entire family to Canada for an opportunity for a work visa, only to find out once he's here that he doesn't have a pathway to Canadian permanent residency. So I just want to be very clear about the program options that Canada has and how they contrast with maybe in the United States a little bit. In Canada, it's a competition for permanent residency. If I could say to a candidate that in a year from now or 2 years from now, you will become a permanent resident, I would have a crystal ball. I would be able to see the future. And I probably wouldn't be working as an immigration lawyer, to be honest with you, if I could do that. So no, there's no way of saying that it's a guarantee. Can you be assured? Well, that to me, using, saying, can I be assured is really, well, you accept that there's some risk and you understand that there is some, but can I go to bed at night, put my head on my pillow and fall asleep without having to worry about visa issues? And in that sense, yes, you can. The first thing we want to do is do a scores calculation of the candidate, not to measure what their express entry score is today. Your express entry score today, you're not going to have a high enough score. What we're really looking at is what will it be, assuming You get a global talent stream work permit, come to Canada with your family, and work in Canada for 1 or 2 years. And to be assured of that, I would recommend that you first go and take a language test, as Marc mentioned before, and have your education credentials, you can have them assessed for the Canadian equivalency. If you studied in the United States, very often a bachelor's degree or a master's degree in the US is going to be equivalent to a bachelor's in Canada or a master's in Canada, but that's how you can be assured. The other step is to take a look at past rounds of invitation to apply, right? We can take a look at all the rounds of invitation that ever existed in Express Entry and plot them. What was the score of the minimum scoring candidate? And just draw them on a line, and then find the trend line, a baseline, and we can say, okay, this is the median. If a candidate has a score above the median, there's a better chance than not that they will be invited in the future, assuming the trends hold. Now, this was really easy to do before COVID. I could take a look, I could see the historical trends, and there was some variation, right? If a candidate had a score of 475 points or more, I'd say in the 95% of the rounds or higher, you're getting an invitation to apply. 440 points, maybe about 25%. Anything in the 420s, there have been rounds that were as low as 413 points. We haven't seen them in a few years, but it doesn't hurt to put your profile in. COVID really changed everything. So I don't know what immigration levels are going to look like for candidates who are outside of Canada in a post-COVID world. And it's really hard to predict what they will look like even inside of Canada post-COVID. And the reason is that the government of Canada over the last several months of 2021, so they've only been inviting candidates who either have Canadian work experience and are applying under the Canadian experience class, or what we call provincial nominees. This is a totally separate topic of discussion. It only represents a small fraction of the immigrants that come to Canada every year, of the economic immigrants even. So pre-COVID, or even before 2021, they were still inviting candidates under the federal skilled worker system. But because they were only inviting almost exclusively candidates through the Canadian experience class, the score required went way down. We used to be talking about a baseline score of 450 on Express Entry. The last few draws for Express Entry have been the 370s, 380s. So way, way low. There was even a draw in February where every single person, 27,000 candidates who were in the pool, the lowest scoring candidate had 75 points. In other words, they just probably had a year of Canadian work experience and marginally passed the language test. So every single person in the pool who had 1 year of Canadian work experience and passed the language test received an invitation to apply for permanent residency. So now you're asking me, Daniel, what kind of risk am I taking? The reality is you have to judge that against your circumstances in the United States, right? I would almost never tell someone to trade a green card for a work visa. If you're 6 months away from your green card and you want to hop to Canada, get your green card first, right? But 10 years or 15 years to wait for a green card, right? Is that a wait? Is that even reasonable? Is that a trade? You have nothing in your hands. That's 10 years of H-1B or longer renewals. That's job stability that very few employers can really offer realistically. Sure, you can hop around and go from employer to employer chasing, going after bigger companies, etc. I remember the .com bubble. Marc, you remember that as well, right? A lot of the visa rules were put into place that we currently have right now about H-1B visa porting because of that whole thing. The situation is not always so clear when you're talking about a time frame that exceeds regular economic cycles of economic expansion and and recession, I should say. And then throw into that mix financial crisis in 2008, 2009, European sovereign debt crisis, COVID, right? Nobody could predict that. So if you accept the fact that there is a comfortable, reasonable margin of risk that you can live with, these catastrophic situations aside, you're probably going to get permanent residency through Canada faster than the US. we look at the historical baseline of those scores, it's probably at some point going to return to that historical baseline, right? It may happen this year, it may happen next year, 2 years from now. But that baseline is based on supply and demand. How many people are interested in moving to Canada, and how many people is the government of Canada inviting? The other thing I want to add before I toss it back over to Allison is that Canada is now accepting more permanent residents than it has in a century. The immigration levels target that Canada set for the next 3-year period, 1.2 million people. The last time Canada that's 400,000 a year. The last time Canada saw immigration levels of 400,000 a year was 1913. It's a different world. We're talking about before the First World War. You got on a ship and you brought a needle. I'm a seamstress. Okay, welcome to Canada, right? You had an axe. Oh, I'm a lumberjack. Welcome to Canada, right? Completely different world. So contrast that with the United States. No significant immigration reform in over 30 years.
Yeah.
Nothing. No economic crisis, no pandemic, nothing changed that. In Canada, we have such a nimble immigration system. This whole path to Canada option and what Syndesis can do through the global talent stream, 2017. Before that, didn't exist, right? Canada is trying to attract top global talent. During the pandemic, what did Canada do? They made it easier for people to extend their work visas longer. You came to Canada as an international student during the pandemic. Guess what? The government said you get an extra 18 months on that open work permit, right? They started working with employers to make it easier to get global talent stream spots. Very different environment, very different culture, and very different views. There is a political consensus in Canada regarding immigration that does not exist in the United States, right? Canada is a nation that is based on immigration. So if I take that more global view and I want to be assured or reassured of my options, right? I just take the Canadian social political context here and then the United States, and it just two different worlds, night and day, right? I would take Canada as an option over the United States if I was sitting in a line for 20 years. Fortunately for me, I don't have to make that choice, but happy to speak to candidates one-on-one to really assess their options and to help them reach that conclusion or whatever conclusion that works for them.
Daniel, before we jump to a next question, I want to build on this some more, because this from one of the recruiters from Path to Canada, they called me yesterday and they said, Mark, I had multiple calls today with people who were in their late 30s to early 40s. They were in the US. They were concerned that their points total works against them because of age. It's this exact question, Daniel. They're asking, they're like, do I swing? And the recruiter's like, on my team was like basically saying like, this, you have to address this, Mark. This question's going to keep coming up. So if I want to make sure I understand what you're saying correctly. So either in this case, if either this person or his wife, if one of them got in on Global Talent Stream, they either one get a tech job or they both get they get work visas in Canada. Global Talent Stream is a 2-year renewable work visa. So if I understand what you're saying correctly, is either of them got a tech job, they're both on their own independent streams. They get 50 points for their separate express entry applications for each of them for getting a job. And then each year in Canada they get more points. So they could both be working towards permanent residence. Is that right? Like they're just piling on points each year and eventually they have enough points to push them to a number?
Yeah, you're mostly there. The Canadian work experience of both spouses actually can combine. You can have, so you can have different profiles for each spouse. So people who are less familiar with the system will often do that. They'll create one profile for one profile for the other, and then they'll list each other as accompanying dependents on each other's application. But if you're working in Canada on a global talent stream work visa, your spouse has an open work permit, and she is now working in Canada, or he is now working in Canada as well, your spouse will accumulate points for your profile if you were the principal applicant as well. It often comes down to deciding, as a law firm, we don't generally create two profiles unnecessarily. Sometimes we will create two for strategic reasons. There may be other provincial nominee programs where that's advantageous to do it. But for the most part, we pick one spouse, and that spouse will be the principal applicant, and they'll build it together over time. They'll both get points over time. And as you said, because this is a renewable process, in 2 years from now, I hope that you're not still waiting for an invitation to apply. I think most of the people that we work with find a path to Canada, even candidates who are over the age of 45. But if someone's concerned about that, have a consultation appointment with me. I'll collect all your bio data, about you and your wife that's relevant to determining your score, and then really get a good sense of it. To answer your recruiter's question, I can send over, Mark, at some point in time, sort of some baseline numbers. I'll run them right now, actually, if you want to take the next question, and give you an idea of a candidate who's 45 years old with let's say a bachelor's degree or a master's degree with language test scores, what they need in order to qualify.
Okay. I know we're from being finished, but Daniel, can you stay a few minutes over, or do you have a hard stop right at 4 p.m. Eastern?
I have until 4:15.
Yeah, so I've got about till 4:10, so we can take a few more questions on. So Allison, let's know.
Yeah, I see about 3 in the queue, so we'll get through them. And we will also be sending access to Daniel's contact information and additional stuff in a follow-up email. So don't worry, it'll all be there. All right, so I see from SM, the roles mentioned during this webinar were mostly software roles. How about other engineering roles? For example, mechanical engineers, electronical engineers?
Yeah, I can. This question is going to be I think we should cover both scenarios, Daniel. I can take probably path to Canada out of this scenario. So when I started the company, I strictly stuck to like hardware, software, tech roles, people who code, people who work with hardware. I tried to keep it very focused in that way. All our customers are like, we're hiring software developers or people with data backgrounds. So Path to Canada as a company, is not geared to help get people coming in saying, hey, I have this kind of architecture degree, or I have this kind of degree. We're not set up yet to help you because we're not connecting to Canadian tech companies on that side who can employ you. Then but then Daniel, then that question for someone trying to go to Canada, then under Global Talent Stream, either on their own or move their job, maybe you might be better able to address where is that dividing line on Global Talent Stream between a tech worker, someone who's writing code, versus someone who has like the candidate said, like they have an engineering background.
Yeah. So it's interesting. The Global Talent Stream didn't start to be exclusively high tech. So, it's got your software engineers, your developers. It still has mathematicians and statisticians. And at one point in time, it had civil engineers on there as well. Now it seems to be focusing more on digital or IT occupations, a few what I'd call business savvy. So someone's a systems analyst, a business systems analyst, for example, business consultants, information systems and security consultants. Those qualify as well as, like I said, mathematicians and statisticians. That's when you're coming in on the global occupations list. It's not the only way to come in through the Global Talent Stream. It may be through Syndesis, one of the easier, more common pathways. There's something else called Category A. Right. So, Mark, you work with a number of Canadian companies that are very innovative. And an innovative company who's bringing in a key person can obtain a Global Talent Stream visa for something outside of those occupations. But that's a really individualized assessment, and it requires something called a referral without losing everyone who's paying attention today, it requires a referral by a designated partner of the immigration department. And you and I, Mark, have actually worked with some of those designated partners in the past. For example, there's an entity, public entity called Toronto Global, and they work with innovative companies around the world on attracting investment into Canada. And one of the things that they will do is also work with innovative Canadian companies who are looking to grow in Canada. If that company goes to them and says, we've got a particular worker in mind that we want to bring to Canada, it doesn't fall on the global talent occupations list, but we are an innovative company, we're helping to grow and hire Canadians, they may refer them to the immigration department to start the process of a global talent stream visa. And then outside of the global talent stream, Canada has trade agreements with a large number of countries around the world. It's possible that a person may have the right passport and qualify through a free trade agreement. And then lastly, we have something called significant benefit. If your position, however it's described, will be a significant benefit to Canada, because you're going to be coming to Canada to supervise or manage a team, work on a key project. It can be economic, social, or cultural benefits that the Canadian government looks at. There may be a different pathway to obtain a work visa. So for something outside of the occupations list that we typically work on, there are other options, but it really requires an individualized assessment to determine whether or not those options are going to be available. For example, other engineers and what their opportunities are. And I think at the very least, Mark, you'll agree with me that if we're going to find something outside of global talent stream occupations list for somebody who's an engineer and they're going through Syndesus, they have to at least be able to do their job remotely. I mean, I don't know too many civil engineers who can work remotely, or mechanical engineers, but oddly enough, I have encountered one. So it's still possible, but we have to really do an individualized assessment for that one.
And I'll give an example of a call that I had. So I had a call with an architect, and the guy worked for an architecture firm. He had some tech ground, but I'm looking at LinkedIn on the call, and I'm like, this guy's master's degree, architecture. And just before I could say, and the company was based in Michigan, and I had the worker on the call and their employer on the call. And just before I could say, I don't know if you qualify, the worker speaks up and says, oh, I already got Canadian permanent residence. It just came in. I got my personal PR card. And I'm like, oh, well, this conversation is just really simple then. You're gonna, next week, you're gonna move to Canada because you can't stay in the US, and I'm gonna legally employ you. I don't even actually need to I don't need to help you get permanent, a work visa, because you have a master's degree, you already qualified on your own. That's the easy solution. The harder solution would have been if his company wasn't allowing him to work remotely, just because path to Canada, just because I'm not working with Canadian tech companies that might be able to employ you in Canada. What I hear some people say is, Mark, as Daniel said, I have a very specialized background. It doesn't fit into, I'm not a coder, I'm not a developer, I don't do software work, but I do specialized work and it can be done remote. I've seen some people saying, Mark, I'm going to approach a bunch of Canadian companies. I'm going to make my case directly to them, and I'm going to find one of them that says, we want you, and we'll reach out to Daniel, an immigration lawyer like him, and we'll do the work to get you in. But that puts the work onto your shoulders then in the US, saying, where is this company in Canada? You have to go after them directly and make your case to them saying, bring me in, I'd be an awesome member of your team.
Yeah. And thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, I forgot, if you qualify for permanent residency and you work remotely, obviously that's not an issue.
That was an easy one.
Yeah.
I think we have time for one or two more calls in the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, we got 3 outstanding. Let's see if we can get through them. All right, Rupali says, if I have not taken the IELTS test but keen to move to Canada, will Path to Canada consider my application? I have 14 plus years on technical experience and 8 plus years of those years in the US.
Just hearing that makes us motivated to say, if you applied, one of our recruiters is going to look at that and say, oh, wow, look at all those years of your experience. You just moved the top of the queue. Let's schedule a video. But one thing, when they get you on the call, they'll ask, why haven't you done your IELTS? So there's a few, every week when we're reviewing the calls, well, I'll hear some people, my recruiting team will say, Mark, this person did not apply for express entry and they did not take the IELTS test. I'm like, well, then are they trying to move to Canada? Are they making personal effort to show that they want to go? Because those are to us, that's the minimum. Saying, I took the test, I studied and took it, and then I went ahead and applied for express entry. If someone hasn't done that, then our question is, well, you're not showing intent to move. Yes, we can get you a job, but when we talk to the employers, what we also tell them is, we tell them this person's motivated, here's their score, they're ready to go. So the worst case scenario is you get a job offer, and then you have to tell the Canadian company, oh wait, hold on, let's go get your IELTS test first, schedule that for a month, and the company's waiting like, I thought this person was ready and motivated to go to Canada. That's why we make it a requirement. We want all that out of the way, so when the job offer comes, as fast as Daniel can process the work visa, you're in.
And just to add to that, Mark, it's absolutely a reasonable requirement. I'm looking right now at the distribution of candidates in the express entry pool from July 19th, 2021. So I should start by saying, in order to enter the pool, you have to take a language test, right? There are 167,000 people in the Canadian express entry pool right now, right? All of them took language tests. Forget about all the others who have taken language tests and haven't entered the pool yet. These profiles are only valid for a year. So these are 167,000 people who are interested to come into Canada, who have scores between 0 and 1,200 points. A large number of them have been sitting in the pool, for quite a while. Over 100,000, I think, have been, or close to 100,000 have been in the pool, who've got scores that are a little bit lower, who recognize that I still need to do this as a step before anyone's going to take me seriously about moving to Canada. So if you're serious about doing it, okay, get serious, take the test, right? I think it's as simple as that. It's not a high threshold. You speak English well, just give it a shot. Don't worry about scoring CLB 10 or having band level 7. Just take it, right? Express your interest, and then we'll know. You can always take the test the second time in the future if you need to do a little bit better.
Thanks, Daniel and Mark. All right, we got 2 more quickly. McCall says, I am working as a structural engineer under H-1B visa. Please share any experience with AEC firms, companies, and transferring to the US job to Canada. AEC stands for Architecture, Engineering, and Construction.
Yeah, that one, I have, because with Path to Canada, we're focused on like more tech jobs. We have not approached any companies in that space. So I can't share any experience we've had moving with someone. I think it goes back to my early example. You're on your own. You'd have to approach Canadian companies and pitch them to get you a work visa and move you up. I think you're definitely on your own. And in parallel to that, you try and get permanent residence. You do those 2 things. You get permanent residence and you just go there and apply for Canadian companies directly sitting in Toronto or Vancouver, wherever you are. I think those are your 2 best approaches.
Thanks, Mark. All right, last one from Amruth. This is Amruth from Texas. I have some queries regarding the present talk, and I seek your suggestion. Currently, I'm in L-1B visa, which expires in November 2021. I am 11 years experienced software engineer with master's degree. Currently, I'm working as a tech lead with experience on data analytics. My spouse is PhD graduate in civil engineering. She is in the US under dependent visa now. My question is there any way for me to shift to Canada in the current situation?
A couple ways. I mean, Daniel, when I hear that, I almost think he should dual track that. Reach out to you to have a discussion on permanent residence. He has a master's degree. He's got November as an expiration date in the US, but master's and express entry, there's a high probability, right? He's going to have enough points to get in, and then separately Path to Canada. Let's try and get him a tech job so we can get him in before that date.
Yeah, that's exactly it. 11 years of experience. I'm probably pegging him around with a master's degree around mid-30s. So wife's got a PhD. She's working. How old is she? And how many years of work experience? They may have an independent pathway to apply for permanent residency. And I would want to just evaluate that first. And if they did, is there a way to shift the job? Well, even if there wasn't, wouldn't you rather be having a Canadian permanent residency approval in your hands when you have that discussion with your employer, if they're willing to shift. Because if not, you both sound highly educated, highly qualified, and working in the United States. You're probably going to be competitive in the Canadian labor market as well. And I would say, you know, dual track, as you mentioned, Mark, reach out to me, reach out to you. And if there's an independent pathway, you know, you may be able to help them out as well with landing employment once they get permanent residency, or to help get them to that point in time.
Yeah, definitely. Both. I'd say both. Reach out to both of us, please. You have at least 2 strategies, maybe even 3. I think we're just a couple minutes. Yeah, we were at 4:11 here, so I think we definitely need to wrap up. We're going to take. We usually do these events every month. We're going to take a break in August. A lot of people are on vacation, so we will resume again in September with the webinars. Definitely appreciate everyone signing up and spending some time and staying a little bit late with us. Try to get through as many questions of yours as we can. I think Allison, like as you said, you're sending follow-up out to everyone, looking at the path to Canada or Syndesis, so they have options, and obviously to Daniel, because some of these questions definitely should be a one-on-one consultation with his firm.
Yeah. And wow. I just wanted to say thank you, Mark, for inviting me, and Allison for hosting, and really looking forward to tackling some of these issues up front with the candidates that we're watching here today.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks for helping out, Allison. Thank you very much. And all of you, thanks for spending